Welcome to Lost Relation Chronicles.
5 years ago, just a month before my wedding, I discovered that my fiancée, Kathy, and my brother, Roger, had been having an affair. Kathy, now 30, only came clean because she was pregnant and wanted to keep the baby. The betrayal stung even more because Roger, now 33, and Kathy had been involved since our engagement. Kathy and I had been together since junior year of high school, going through college and everything. Getting engaged had felt like the natural next step after so many years together. But shortly after we got engaged, my brother confessed to Kathy that he had always had feelings for her. With our wedding approaching, he said he couldn't keep it to himself any longer. Somehow, this led Kathy to realize that she, too, had been developing feelings for him. They even flirted behind my back occasionally, even at family gatherings, though she claimed she'd stayed with me because she wasn't certain about Roger. 5 years ago, a few months before my wedding, my entire world shattered. Kathy and my brother, Roger, sat me down along with my parents to break the news. They told me they were planning to be together, and Kathy couldn't marry me because she was in love with Roger and pregnant with his child. I was devastated, struggling even to process it. In my shock, I asked Kathy to come back home with me and end whatever she had going on with Roger. But my mother stepped in firmly, saying that nothing like that was going to happen. She insisted that Roger and Kathy were going to be together and told me I needed to make peace with it, as it was ultimately their decision. I was horrified by her response. She didn't just support them. She acted like my feelings didn't even matter. My dad looked ashamed, at least, and tried to comfort me, but my mom was unapologetically on their side. She even told me that if I had a problem, I should keep it to myself because Kathy was pregnant and in a delicate condition, and I had no right to bother her. It felt like my own mother had turned her back on me. My mother was thrilled at the thought of finally having a grandchild in the family, and her excitement completely overshadowed any concern for what I was going through. She fought me tooth and nail, justifying everything that was happening as if it were somehow acceptable. After that painful confrontation, Kathy moved in with my family since her own parents cut ties with her when they learned the truth. Naturally, my wedding was canceled, and my parents covered the costs to spare me the financial burden. However, my refusal to speak to them led to me being essentially cast out from the family. Over the past 5 years, we haven't had any contact. My father tried reaching out once, but I didn't respond, and since then, it's been total radio silence. It took me a long time and a lot of therapy to begin healing from what happened. Kathy and I had been together for so many years. I truly loved her, so it was a long, painful journey to get to where I am now. I wouldn't say I'm completely over it, but I've learned to cope. Some other family members stayed in touch with me, and through them, I learned that Kathy had a son with my brother. A month after the birth, a paternity test confirmed that Roger was the father, not me. 5 years passed with no contact from my family. Kathy and Roger got married and built a life together, and I assumed everything was going well for them. But about a week ago, my mother unexpectedly reached out. Since she had always been the most vocal supporter of Kathy and Roger's relationship, her call surprised me. Out of curiosity, I called her back after she sent an email saying she urgently needed to speak with me. When I returned her call, she was crying and delivered some painful news. My brother had been in a severe accident, a hit and run. Due to the impact, he slipped into a coma, and the doctors couldn't predict when or if he would recover. The accident happened just a week ago, and 3 days after the doctors declared his condition critical, my mother decided to inform me. At first, I thought my mother was calling to ask me to visit Roger in the hospital and support the family during such a difficult time. Despite everything, I could understand why they might want me there, given the severity of Roger's condition. But then my mother took a completely unexpected turn. She told me she wanted me to step up and be there for Kathy and my nephew. Confused, I asked what she meant, and she explained that, with Roger essentially not there anymore, she expected me to step into his role, to support Kathy and her son in every way, not just financially but also by moving in with them and taking care of them. My mother said she would have taken them in herself, but she felt she was too old to manage that responsibility. She even expected me to decide on the spot. I couldn't believe it. After 5 years of silence, my mother's first words to me weren't an apology or an olive branch, but a request that I step in to support the people who betrayed me. Kathy and her son deserve family support right now, but that support shouldn't be coming from me, the one they'd hurt and cast out. I told my mother, firmly, that I wouldn't be doing anything of the sort, and that she was foolish even to expect it. After my mother started arguing with me on the phone, I was already frustrated and didn't want to waste any more energy on it, so I just hung up and blocked her number again. I tried to go on with my day, but I couldn't shake the feeling of sympathy for what Roger and Kathy were going through. Still, stepping in to take my brother's place was out of the question. Roger was still alive, just in a coma, and my mother was acting like he was gone entirely. The whole situation made me feel uneasy. Later, I decided to call my father. He'd usually been the more reasonable of my parents, so I thought he might offer a more balanced perspective. Talking to him after 5 years felt awkward, but after some small talk, I asked him how Roger was doing. He confirmed that things weren't looking good for Roger, which was difficult to hear. I then told him about the conversation with my mother, expecting he'd understand my side or at least offer some reasonable insight. But to my surprise, he agreed with her, saying it was fair for her to ask me to support Kathy and her son. I was stunned. I'd thought my dad would see the strangeness of the request, but instead, he was also pushing me toward the very thing I found unreasonable and unsettling. When I pressed my dad, he confirmed that he meant it. He genuinely thought I should step up for Kathy and my nephew because we had history and I was still family, regardless of the past 5 years. He argued that, as family, I should be the one they can count on in a crisis, and he didn't see my mother's expectations as unreasonable. That response threw me for a loop. I haven't known how to respond since then. For the past week, I've avoided talking to anyone in the family, even other relatives, because I'm worried they'll bring it up, and I'll have to explain myself. I feel like the bad guy for not stepping up for my family when they're in such a tough situation. I know they need support, if not financial, at least emotional. But what my mom is asking feels unnatural and intrusive. I haven't even been to the hospital to see Roger, as the whole situation feels too strange and overwhelming. I also haven't talked to any friends about it because it's so deeply personal. My friends know about the rift with my family since my wedding was called off, but this is a whole new level of awkwardness and confusion. I feel completely lost on how to handle it all, and I'm torn between a sense of obligation to my family and my own need for boundaries. I don't find an acceptable solution, and I feel like I'm slipping back into that dark period of my life, when thoughts of Kathy and Roger consumed me after discovering their betrayal. It took a lot for me to pull myself out of that place, and I don't want to go back there. I've decided not to visit my family for now. It's just too overwhelming. I hadn't even realized how much anxiety this whole situation was causing until I noticed how much it had ramped up over the past week. I've gone back on my anti-anxiety meds and am trying to cope. The outpouring of love and support from people commenting on my original post, and even reaching out personally, has been incredible. I'm deeply grateful for everyone who has reminded me I'm not alone. I've also opened up to a few close friends about what's been happening because I honestly can't handle this all by myself. They've reassured me that choosing not to visit right now is the best thing I can do for myself. They pointed out that, just as Roger and the rest of my family have always put their own needs first, it's time I do the same. Honestly, I don't think I need to be there for them emotionally either. They have each other to lean on. I remember vividly how alone I felt after the wedding was called off, after discovering the betrayal, and how my family chose my brother over me when I needed them most. That's in the past now, and I'm focusing on moving forward from it. I know I won't be able to move on successfully if I reconnect with them, so I've blocked all of my family members again and am committed to not having any contact with them. I genuinely feel sorry for what happened to my brother, and I truly hope he recovers soon. No matter what he's done, I can't bring myself to wish ill on anyone. I hope things work out for them, but right now, I need to focus on my own mental health. I'm considering going back to therapy because I realize how much my parents' comments have affected me. I thought I was coping better, but those old feelings are resurfacing, and I think talking to a professional would be beneficial. I've heard from a few relatives that my brother's condition remains critical, and he hasn't shown any signs of improvement. It's been nearly 2 weeks, and he's still in the hospital. I feel for my family, but there's not much I can do. Everyone else who knows my family has visited the hospital at least once in these past 2 weeks to offer their condolences, while I have stayed away. I would have considered visiting, but I learned from my relatives that my parents have been talking negatively about me to anyone who visits. They're portraying me as the bad guy, claiming they asked me to come and support the family, but I refused. They've even suggested that this situation is karma for what happened 5 years ago, saying my brother deserves this. For the record, I never said anything like that. Some relatives reached out to confirm if these accusations were true, knowing it didn't sound like something I would say, given that I generally try to be a nice person. When they asked, I made it clear that my parents were lying to make me look terrible, likely as a reaction to my decision to cut ties with them. It really disappointed me to hear they were spreading such falsehoods, especially after they had already disrupted my life once. I'm grateful that my relatives came to me for clarification. If they had just taken my parents' word for it, I might have found myself isolated from the entire family again. Over the past 5 years, while I haven't spoken to my parents, my aunts, uncles, and cousins have all supported me. I really didn't want to lose that connection, and it seems my parents couldn't stand that I still had those relationships, so they tried to sabotage them too. I just can't comprehend why they harbor so much hatred toward me. I've never done anything to deserve this. My brother and I have never had a close relationship, and my parents have always favored him, but this feels excessive and completely unnecessary. My mother decided to reach out to me again. Since I had blocked them on all platforms, she had no choice but to come to my house to talk to me. When I returned home from work, she was already there, waiting for me. To be honest, I wasn't in the mood to talk because I was exhausted from work. I almost considered getting back in my car to avoid her, but she spotted me, so I had no choice but to engage. I didn't want to let her into my house because it would be difficult to get rid of her once she was inside. Instead, I opted to speak with her in the front yard, which turned out to be a bad idea because she eventually started yelling, drawing the attention of our neighbors. The conversation began on a relatively calm note. She made some small talk, and I responded politely. However, I couldn't hold back any longer and asked her why she was spreading falsehoods about me to portray me as the bad guy. I told her it wasn't fair, especially since I've never wished harm on my family, despite how they've treated me. I genuinely just wanted to move on with my life, but they were making that incredibly difficult for me. I had kept these feelings bottled up for so long that when I finally saw her, everything just spilled out. I couldn't help myself. In the end, I told her that, given everything that had happened, it was hard for me to think of them as a family because they had never treated me like one. I expressed my disappointment in their behavior and made it clear that whatever she had come to discuss could wait. I had just gotten home from work and wasn't in the mood to fight or engage in an emotionally draining conversation. Up until that point, she had been listening to me calmly, but when I said I didn't want to talk to her at that moment, she got really angry. She claimed she was there to apologize for everything I had mentioned and said that she and my father had finally realized they hadn't treated me well over the past 5 years. She acknowledged that I was obviously upset, and that was why I hadn't been visiting my brother in the hospital. She insisted she came to sort things out between us because she felt the family should stick together for the sake of emotional stability during this tough time. However, after I told her I wasn't in the mood to talk, she flipped and decided to yell at me instead. She told me that I should just be grateful I still have a family at all, especially after how I reacted when I learned about my brother's accident. She said she had half a mind to cut me off completely and make sure the rest of my relatives did the same. I was confused by her accusation, so she elaborated, explaining that she believed my reaction wasn't sad enough. Apparently, she expected me to show more emotion when I heard the news, but I sounded indifferent on the phone. No matter our personal issues, hearing something like that would undoubtedly affect me, and it genuinely did. I never wished anything bad on anyone, including my family, despite our strained relationships. I was upset about his accident, but perhaps that didn't come through in my voice since she couldn't see my face. Her reasons were completely baseless and illogical. She even went so far as to say that my lack of support for Kathy and my nephew, and my refusal to step up for my brother, demonstrated how little I cared for the family. She was just fabricating things again to justify their behavior, and I honestly think my parents are starting to lose their marbles because this whole situation is completely bizarre and unnecessary. Once she started yelling at me, I lost all interest in continuing the conversation, so I decided to go inside my house and asked her to leave. After a while, I unlocked the door and stepped inside while she was still shouting at me. When she tried to follow me in, I shut the door in her face and told her to go away because I was seriously angry and didn't want to interact with her anymore. She continued to argue, but I threatened to call the police, and that's when she finally left, though not before cursing me and saying I would face consequences for my actions. I have no idea what that means, and honestly, I'm not interested in finding out. I just want to relax and move on with my life. So, it's been 26 days since the accident, and my family finally has some good news to share. Of course, they didn't tell me personally. I found out through my cousins. The good news is that my brother is finally showing signs of improvement. He's no longer in a coma and is responding better, which is a positive sign. I truly hope he continues to improve from this point onward because the last month has been really stressful for everyone, including me, even though I'm no longer part of the family and have been effectively cast out. The way my parents have been treating me over the past 26 days has really shown me how unhinged they are. It feels like they've just been taking out their frustrations on me. After my last interaction with my mother, which I mentioned in my previous update, I didn't hear from her for a couple of days. Then my father decided to call me, but he used a different number than usual, so I didn't recognize it was him. As soon as I answered, he started yelling at me without giving me a chance to hang up. He was quite sneaky about it, trying to catch me off guard by calling at 5 o'clock in the morning, knowing I'd be asleep and groggy when I picked up. After a few calls, I finally answered the fourth one, and he immediately launched into an angry tirade about how ungrateful I was and how he wished I had never been born. He claimed he would ensure that the rest of the family never spoke to me again because I hadn't even bothered to visit my brother in the hospital while he was suffering and wasn't there for the family. After ranting for nearly 5 minutes, my father was the one to hang up, leaving me to process everything he just said. By the time I was ready to respond, he had already blocked my number. At the time, it wasn't very amusing, but looking back, I find it quite funny how desperate my parents are to paint me as the bad guy. They go to such extremes to yell at me over trivial matters. I've mentioned before that I believe they were just taking out their frustrations on me. They needed a scapegoat, and I happened to be the one. But it's fine because my father hasn't succeeded in turning the rest of the family against me. They know I'm not in the wrong and remember what happened 5 years ago. Now that my brother's condition is improving, I just hope my parents will ease off and focus on him instead. It's been 3 years, and so much has changed, mostly for the better. I've been living in Germany for work for the past year and a half, and I've started a relationship with my girlfriend. We've been together for 8 months now, and it's been truly blissful. Over the past 3 years, I've had no contact with my family, which has also been a blessing, to be honest. I've stayed in touch with my relatives who are kind to me, which has been nice. My brother hasn't fully recovered from the accident. While he survived, he is paralyzed below the waist. Kathy reached out to apologize for everything that happened in the past, but I told her that at this point, an apology felt meaningless and unnecessary. She visited me with a bouquet after some relatives, who knew I was moving to Germany for work, informed her. However, my brother couldn't join her because he felt too ashamed about what happened 8 years ago and, of course, because he cannot walk. My parents tried to call me, but this time I made it clear that they are no longer part of my life. I told them it would be better if we never interacted again, as the next time they called, they would be reaching out to a stranger. Since then, I've been in Germany, and my parents don't speak to me anymore, which I'm really happy about. I have a new girlfriend, and we are planning to get married soon. Dear listeners, please share your thoughts in the comments section below, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Hello, and welcome to Cheating Tales Lab. We're thrilled to have you here today. Sit tight, because we've got a fascinating story lined up for you. Ready? Let's get right into it. The fog hung thick over the highway, transforming the world into a gray soup. Roman Conway squinted through the windshield of the ambulance, his knuckles white on the steering wheel. The call had come in moments ago. Multi-car pileup, unknown number of victims. Jesus, his partner, Francisco Gallagher, muttered as they rounded a bend. The scene unfolded before them like a nightmare tableau. Twisted metal, shattered glass, the acrid stench of burning rubber. Roman's training kicked in immediately. Call for backup, he barked at Francisco as he jumped out of the ambulance. We're gonna need every available unit. Roman moved swiftly, assessing the situation. A silver sedan caught his eye, or what was left of it. The front end was completely crushed, steam hissing from the crumpled hood. As he approached, he heard it, a woman's scream, high and desperate. Help! Please, someone help me. Roman's heart rate spiked as he peered through the shattered driver's side window. The woman inside was heavily pregnant, her distended belly pressed against the steering wheel. Blood matted her dark hair, and her eyes were wide with panic. Ma'am, I'm a paramedic, Roman called, already reaching for his tools. Can you tell me your name? Sarah, she gasped. Please, my baby. I think something's wrong. Roman's mind raced. The woman was pinned, and from the looks of it, in active labor. He'd never performed a field delivery in conditions like this, let alone a C-section. But as he watched Sarah's face contort with another contraction, he knew he had no choice. Sarah, listen to me, he said, his voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through his veins. I'm going to get you out of here, but I need you to stay calm. Can you do that for me? She nodded, tears streaming down her face. Roman worked quickly, cutting through the mangled door with practiced efficiency. As he eased Sarah onto the stretcher, he felt a warm gush of fluid. Her water had broken. Francisco, he yelled. I need you over here now. His partner appeared at his side, face grim as he took in the situation. We can't move her, Roman said, his voice low. Baby's coming now, and I think there might be complications. We're going to have to do this here. Francisco's eyes widened, but he nodded, already reaching for the necessary equipment. The next few minutes were a blur of focused intensity. Roman's hands moved with practiced precision as he prepared for the emergency C-section. Sarah's screams had faded to low moans, her eyes glassy with shock. "Stay with me, Sarah," Roman murmured as he made the first incision. "You're doing great." Time seemed to stretch and compress. Roman was vaguely aware of the chaos around him. The wail of approaching sirens, the shouts of other first responders. But his world had narrowed to this. The woman on the stretcher, the life growing inside her, and his own steady hands. And then, suddenly, a cry pierced the air. Roman lifted the tiny, squirming infant, a wave of relief washing over him. "It's a girl," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "She's perfect, Sarah." As he placed the baby on Sarah's chest, Roman became aware of the crowd that had gathered. His fellow paramedics, police officers, even some of the less injured victims of the pileup. They were all watching, faces a mix of awe and relief. In that moment, as he watched mother and child take their first breaths together, Roman felt a profound sense of purpose. This was why he did this job. This was what it meant to make a difference. The house was quiet when Roman got home, the events of the day still thrumming through his veins. He'd been lauded as a hero at the hospital, but all he wanted was a hot shower and his own bed. "Cassandra," he called out, dropping his keys on the side table. No answer. Roman frowned, moving through the house. It wasn't unusual for his wife to be out, but something felt off. He couldn't quite put his finger on it. In the kitchen, he noticed the blinking light on the answering machine. He hit play, half listening as he opened the fridge. "Mr. Conway, this is Janet from First National Bank. I'm calling about the recent large withdrawals from your joint account. We just wanted to verify." Roman froze, the carton of orange juice halfway to his lips. Large withdrawals? He hadn't made any large withdrawals. He set the juice down, a cold feeling settling in his stomach. Now that he thought about it, there had been other signs. Cassandra's increasingly secretive behavior, her vague explanations about where she'd been. Roman booted up their shared computer, a sick feeling of dread growing as he accessed their online banking. The transactions stood out like neon signs, thousands of dollars, withdrawn over the past few months. And there, buried in the credit card statements, charges at high-end hotels he'd never heard of. His hands shook as he closed the browser. This couldn't be happening. Not to them. Not to him. But even as denial rose up, a part of Roman knew. He'd seen it before, in the broken families he encountered on the job. The signs were all there. With a heavy heart, Roman made a decision. He'd install security cameras in the house. Just to be sure. Just to have proof, one way or the other. As he worked, carefully hiding the tiny cameras, Roman felt a part of himself hardening. Whatever happened next, he'd face it head-on. He was Roman Conway, after all. He saved lives for a living. He could save his own damn marriage. The annual Conway family reunion was in full swing, the backyard a riot of laughter, music, and the smell of barbecue. Roman moved through the crowd, plastering on a smile as he greeted relatives. Cassandra was across the yard, deep in conversation with his sister Monique. Roman watched his wife, searching for any sign of guilt or unease. But Cassandra laughed at something Monique said, looking for all the world like the perfect hostess. Uncle Roman. His nephew Tommy came barreling towards him, a water gun in hand. "Come play with us." Roman was about to agree when a commotion at the gate caught his attention. His blood ran cold as he recognized the man stumbling into the yard. Louis Kaufman, the smooth-talking pharmaceutical rep who'd been hanging around Cassandra's office lately. And from the look of him, he was drunk off his ass. "Where is she?" Louis slurred, pushing past a startled Aunt Edna. "Where's Cassandra?" Roman moved quickly, intercepting Louis before he could get further into the yard. "Louis," he said, keeping his voice low and steady. "You need to leave. Now." But Louis wasn't having it. He shoved Roman, hard enough to make him stumble. "You're a fool, Conway," he spat. "Cassandra's been mine for years. Ever wonder why your kids look nothing like you?" The world seemed to tilt on its axis. Roman felt a roaring in his ears, barely aware of the shocked gasps from his family members. But even as rage and pain threatened to overwhelm him, a part of his mind remained clear. Slowly, carefully, Roman reached into his pocket and pressed the button on the small recording device he'd taken to carrying. Then he met Lewis's bloodshot eyes. "Thanks for the public confession of paternity fraud, Lewis," he said, his voice eerily calm. Lewis's face contorted with fury. He lunged at Roman, fists swinging wildly. But Roman was ready. He sidestepped neatly, watching with satisfaction as Lewis stumbled, his momentum carrying him forward. There was a sickening crack as Lewis's face met the edge of the picnic table. He went down hard, blood streaming from his mouth. In the stunned silence that followed, Roman turned to face his family. Cassandra stood frozen, her face a mask of horror and guilt. "Party's over," Roman said, his voice carrying across the yard. "I think it's time for everyone to go home." As his relatives filed out, murmuring in shocked disbelief, Roman felt a strange sense of calm settle over him. The worst had happened, yes, but he'd faced it, and he'd survived. Now, it was time to fight. Arthur Lowe's office was a sanctuary of mahogany and leather, the kind of place that whispered of old money and discreet solutions. Roman sat across from his old friend, the weight of betrayal heavy on his shoulders. "You're sure about this?" Arthur asked, his fingers steepled under his chin. "Once we file, there's no going back." Roman nodded, his jaw set. "I'm sure. You've seen the evidence." Arthur sighed, reaching for a thick manila folder. "I have. And it's damning, Roman. The bank statements, the hotel receipts, the security footage. It's more than enough to prove infidelity. And the paternity fraud?" Roman's voice was barely above a whisper. "That's trickier," Arthur admitted. "Lewis's drunken confession at the reunion helps, but we'll need DNA tests to prove it conclusively. Are you prepared for that? To potentially learn that the children you've raised are not mine?" Roman finished. "I have to know, Arthur, for their sake as much as mine." Arthur nodded, his expression grim. "All right, I'll file the papers today. We're going for full custody, citing Cassandra's negligence and deceit. But Roman, you need to be prepared. This is going to get ugly." As if on cue, Arthur's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, his frown deepening. It's already started. The Tribune's running a story on the hero paramedic's shocking divorce. "Your private life is about to become very public." Roman closed his eyes, feeling the weight of the world pressing down on him. But when he opened them again, there was steel in his gaze. "Let them come. I've got nothing to hide." As Roman left Arthur's office, he felt a strange mix of dread and relief. The truth was out now, for better or worse. He thought of his children. Were they his children? Waiting at home, blissfully unaware of the storm about to break over their lives. He'd shield them as best he could, but he knew that innocence, once lost, could never truly be regained. The next few weeks were a blur of legal meetings, DNA tests, and avoiding reporters camped outside his house. Roman threw himself into his work, finding solace in the familiar routines of saving lives. But even there, he couldn't escape the whispers, the sidelong glances from colleagues who'd read the salacious headlines. It was Francisco who finally cornered him in the locker room after a particularly grueling shift. "You can't keep this bottled up forever, man," he said, his usual jovial tone replaced with concern. "Talk to me. What's really going on?" Roman stared at his locker, the words stuck in his throat. But Francisco waited patiently, and finally, the dam broke. Roman told him everything. The affair, the paternity doubts, the custody battle looming on the horizon. When he finished, Francisco let out a low whistle. "Jesus, Roman, I had no idea it was that bad. But listen, you're not alone in this, okay? Whatever you need, I've got your back." Roman nodded, grateful for the support. As he left the station that night, he felt a little lighter. He couldn't control the media circus or the outcome of the legal battle, but he wasn't facing it alone. That, at least, was something. The first cases trickled in slowly, barely a blip on the radar of Chicago's bustling emergency rooms. A few cases of severe flu, nothing too out of the ordinary for the tail end of winter. But then the trickle became a stream, and before anyone fully realized what was happening, it had turned into a flood. Roman stumbled out of the ambulance, his eyes burning from lack of sleep. This was his fourth straight shift, and the city showed no signs of slowing down. As he wheeled another gasping patient into the overcrowded ER, he caught sight of Dr. Velma Reeves, the hospital's chief of emergency medicine. Dr. Reeves was a force of nature, her silver hair pulled back in a severe bun, her eyes sharp behind wire-rimmed glasses. She barked orders with the precision of a military commander, somehow managing to bring order to the chaos of the overwhelmed hospital. "Conway," she called out as Roman passed. "I need you for a moment." Roman followed her into a quiet corner, his exhaustion momentarily forgotten in the face of her intensity. "I've been watching you," Dr. Reeves said without preamble. "You've been working nonstop since this outbreak began. Your dedication is impressive." Roman shrugged, uncomfortable with the praise. "Just doing my job, ma'am." Dr. Reeves's eyes narrowed. "No, it's more than that. I've read about your personal situation." She held up a hand as Roman opened his mouth to protest. "I'm not here to gossip. I'm here to offer my support." She pulled out a business card, pressing it into Roman's hand. "I understand you're in the middle of a custody battle. If you need a character witness, someone to speak to your work ethic and dedication, I'd be happy to testify." Roman stared at the card, a lump forming in his throat. "Dr. Reeves, thank you. I don't know what to say." "Say you'll get some rest," she replied, her tone softening slightly. "You're no good to anyone if you work yourself to death. Now go home, Conway." "That's an order." As Roman left the hospital, he felt a glimmer of hope for the first time in weeks. The custody hearings were looming, but now he had an unexpected ally in his corner. Maybe, just maybe, things were starting to look up. But even as he thought it, he couldn't shake the nagging feeling that Cassandra and Lewis weren't done fighting dirty. He'd have to stay on his toes, ready for whatever they might throw at him next. Johnny Quick was not a man burdened by an excess of journalistic integrity. He preferred to think of himself as pragmatic, a survivor in the cutthroat world of modern media. So when Lewis Kaufman approached him with a juicy story and a fat envelope of cash, Johnny didn't hesitate. "We want you to write a series of articles," Lewis said, his smile oily in the dim light of the bar. Questioning Roman Conway's competence as a paramedic, Johnny raised an eyebrow. "Conway? The guy who delivered that baby on the highway? That's going to be a tough sell, buddy." Lewis's smile didn't waver. "That's why we're paying you the big bucks, Johnny. Get creative. Dig up some dirt. There's got to be something in his past we can use." As Lewis laid out the details of their plan, Johnny felt a twinge of something. Not quite guilt. He'd smothered that particular emotion years ago, but maybe a flicker of unease. Still, money was money, and times were tough. He'd do the job. The first article hit like a bombshell. "Hero paramedic. Savior or menace?" The headline screamed. Johnny had done his homework, dredging up every minor complaint, every moment of hesitation in Roman's career, and spinning it into a narrative of incompetence and recklessness. Roman stared at the newspaper, his hands shaking with a mix of rage and disbelief. The article was a masterpiece of innuendo and half-truths, painting him as a danger to the very people he'd sworn to protect. "This is bullshit," Francisco snarled, snatching the paper away. "Everyone knows you're the best damn paramedic in the city." But the damage was done. As the days went by and more articles appeared, Roman could feel the tide of public opinion turning against him. Whispers followed him everywhere he went. Parents pulled their children closer when he passed on the street. Even some of his colleagues began to eye him warily, as if wondering if there might be some truth to the accusations. The stress was taking its toll. Roman found himself snapping at the slightest provocation, dark circles growing under his eyes as sleep became increasingly elusive. It was Francisco who finally intervened, dragging Roman to a rundown community center on the edge of town. "What are we doing here?" Roman asked, eyeing the graffiti-covered walls skeptically. Francisco grinned. "You need an outlet, man. Something to take your mind off all this crap. They run a youth mentoring program here. I figured, who better to inspire some troubled kids than Chicago's finest paramedic?" Roman opened his mouth to protest, But Francisco was already pushing him through the door. Inside, a group of teenagers lounged on mismatched furniture, eyeing the newcomers with a mix of curiosity and suspicion. "Listen up, you little delinquents," Francisco announced cheerfully. "This here is Roman Conway. He's going to be volunteering with us for a while. Try not to scare him off, all right?" As the teens gathered around, their initial wariness giving way to genuine interest, Roman felt something shift inside him. Here, in this dingy community center, he wasn't the subject of scandalous headlines or vicious rumors. He was just a guy with some stories to tell and some wisdom to share. For the first time in weeks, Roman felt the knot in his chest begin to loosen. He couldn't control what the papers said about him or how the custody battle would play out. But here, in this moment, he could make a difference. And maybe, just maybe, that would be enough to see him through the storm. As the weeks went by, Roman fell into a new routine. Work, custody hearings, and evenings at the youth center. The articles continued, each more outrageous than the last. But Roman found himself caring less and less. He had bigger battles to fight. It was at the youth center that he met Rosalie, a social worker with kind eyes and a no-nonsense attitude. She didn't seem to care about the headlines or the rumors. She just saw a man trying his best to make a difference. "You're good with them?" she said one evening, watching as Roman demonstrated basic first aid to a group of enthralled teenagers. "They respond to you." Roman shrugged, but he couldn't hide the small smile tugging at his lips. "They're good kids. Just need someone to believe in them." Rosalie nodded, her expression thoughtful. "Sometimes that's all any of us need." As they stood there, watching the teens practice CPR on battered mannequins, Roman felt a spark of something he hadn't experienced in a long time. Hope. Whatever challenges lay ahead, he knew he'd face them head-on. He was Roman Conway, after all. Saving lives was what he did best. Monique Conway had always been the family wild child. While Roman followed the straight and narrow path, she'd zigzagged through life, leaving a trail of broken hearts and unpaid bar tabs in her wake. But beneath the carefree exterior beat the heart of a lioness when it came to her big brother. The seedy bar on the outskirts of Chicago was Monique's natural habitat. She nursed a whiskey, sharp eyes scanning the crowd. When Cassandra and Louis walked in, Monique nearly choked on her drink. What the hell were they doing here? She slouched lower in her booth, pulling the brim of her hat down. The estranged couple didn't notice her as they slid into a nearby booth, heads bent close in conspiratorial whispers. Monique's curiosity got the better of her. She casually moved to the jukebox, pretending to flip through song selections while straining to catch snippets of their conversation. "Running out of options," Cassandra hissed. "The custody hearing is in 2 weeks, and that idiot Dr. Reeves is going to testify for Roman." Louis knocked back a shot, his handsome face twisted with frustration. "We need something big. Something that'll destroy his credibility once and for all." Cassandra's next words sent a chill down Monique's spine. "What about the substances at the hospital? If we could make it look like Roman's been stealing..." Louis's eyes lit up with malicious glee. "Plant some stolen pharmaceuticals in his paramedic kit. A conviction like that would ruin him professionally and in the custody case." "Exactly," Cassandra purred. "I still have access to the house. I could easily slip something into his kit before his next shift." Monique's hand froze on the jukebox. This was bad. Really bad. She needed to warn Roman. As she slipped out of the bar, Monique's mind raced. She'd made more than her fair share of mistakes in life, but she'd never stooped to the level of framing someone for a crime. The fact that Cassandra could do this to Roman, the father of her children, made Monique's blood boil. She fumbled for her phone, nearly dropping it in her haste to call Roman. When his voicemail picked up, she swore under her breath. "Roman, it's Mo, call me back ASAP. It's about Cassandra and Louis. They're planning something, and it's not good." Monique paced outside the bar, chain-smoking as she waited for Roman to call back. When her phone finally buzzed, she nearly jumped out of her skin. "Mo? What's going on?" Roman's voice was tense, wary. "We've got a problem, big bro," Monique said, her voice low. "I just overheard Cassandra and Louis plotting to frame you for substance theft at the hospital. They're going to plant stolen meds in your kit." There was a long silence on the other end of the line. Then, Roman's voice, cold and determined. "Tell me everything." Arthur Lowe's office had become a war room. Roman sat at the head of the conference table, flanked by Monique and Arthur. Dr. Velma Reeves paced by the window, her normally impassive face clouded with concern. "This is a serious accusation," Dr. Reeves said, her voice clipped. "If they succeed in planting those substances, the consequences would be catastrophic. Not just for Roman's career, but for the entire hospital." Roman nodded. "Which is why we need to catch them in the act. We can't just accuse them without proof. They'll deny everything, and it'll look like I'm trying to smear them out of spite." Arthur leaned forward, his lawyer's mind already formulating a plan. "We need to set up a sting operation. Let them think their plan is working, then catch them red-handed." "It's risky," Monique argued. "What if something goes wrong? Roman could lose everything." "I don't have much left to lose," Roman said quietly. He thought of his children, of the life he'd built. "But I have everything to gain. I'm tired of being on the defensive. It's time we took the fight to them." Dr. Reeves nodded approvingly. "I'll coordinate with hospital security. We'll set up hidden cameras in the locker room. Roman, you'll need to act completely normal. Give them no reason to suspect you're onto them." As they hammered out the details of their counterplan, Roman felt a strange sense of calm settle over him. For months, he'd been reacting, always one step behind Cassandra and Lewis's scheming. Now, finally, he had a chance to take control. The next few days were a masterclass in deception. Roman went about his duties at the hospital with his usual dedication, all while knowing that Cassandra and Lewis were plotting his downfall. He felt their eyes on him, watching for any sign of weakness or suspicion. On the night of the planned frame-up, Roman's nerves were stretched to the breaking point. He clocked in for his shift as usual, exchanging small talk with his colleagues. As he approached his locker, he could almost feel the trap about to spring. "Conway." Dr. Reeves's voice rang out across the locker room. "I need you in my office."
Now.
Roman turned, catching a glimpse of Cassandra lurking near the row of lockers. Her face was a mask of frustrated anger. He suppressed a smile as he followed Dr. Reeves out. In her office, Dr. Reeves spoke loudly for the benefit of the hidden microphones. "I'm putting you on administrative leave, effective immediately. There have been concerns raised about your conduct." Roman played his part, protesting his innocence with just the right amount of confusion and indignation. As he stormed out of her office, he saw Cassandra slip into the locker room. The trap was set. Hours later, Roman sat in a dimly lit security office, watching the footage unfold on multiple screens. There was Cassandra, furtively approaching his locker. Lewis appeared moments later, keeping watch as she worked the lock. Roman's fists clenched as he watched his estranged wife plant the stolen substances in his kit. It was one thing to know what she was planning, another entirely to see it happening. Just as Cassandra closed the locker, the lights in the room flared to life. Police officers swarmed in, led by Dr. Reeves herself. "Cassandra Kaufman, Lewis Kaufman, you're under arrest for attempted evidence tampering and conspiracy to commit fraud," the lead officer announced. The look of shock and betrayal on Cassandra's face as she was led away in handcuffs was almost satisfying. Almost. As the adrenaline of the sting operation wore off, Roman felt a deep weariness settle into his bones. This wasn't a victory to celebrate. It was the final nail in the coffin of his marriage, the death of the family he'd thought he had. But as he watched the police car carrying Cassandra and Lewis drive away, he also felt something else. Hope. For the first time in months, the future didn't look quite so bleak. The courtroom was packed. A sea of faces all turned towards the elevated bench where Judge Ethel Blackwell presided. Roman sat at the plaintiff's table, Arthur at his side. Across the aisle, Cassandra and Lewis looked pale and defeated, their lawyer whispering urgently in their ears. Judge Blackwell's gavel cracked like a gunshot, silencing the murmurs of the crowd. In the matter of Conway versus Kaufman, this court is now in session. What followed was a brutal dissection of Cassandra and Lewis's actions. Arthur presented a mountain of evidence, financial records showing Cassandra's embezzlement from the joint accounts, DNA tests proving Lewis's paternity of the children, and most damning of all, the video footage of their attempted frame-up. Dr. Reeves took the stand, her testimony a scathing indictment of the couple's character. In all my years of medicine, I have never encountered such a blatant disregard for ethics and human decency, she declared, her eyes flashing with righteous anger. As the proceedings wore on, Roman found his gaze drawn to Cassandra, the woman he'd loved, the mother of his children. How had it come to this? He searched her face for any sign of remorse, any flicker of the person he'd once known. But all he saw was a mask of cold defiance. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Judge Blackwell cleared her throat. The courtroom fell silent, every ear straining to catch her words. The actions of the defendants, Cassandra and Lewis Kaufman, are nothing short of reprehensible, she began, her voice ringing with authority. They have engaged in a systematic campaign of fraud, defamation, and attempted evidence tampering. Their disregard for the law and for basic human decency is shocking. She turned her steely gaze on Cassandra and Lewis. You face multiple criminal charges, including fraud, defamation, and attempted evidence tampering. This court recommends the maximum sentences allowed by law. A gasp rippled through the courtroom. Roman sat very still, hardly daring to breathe. Furthermore, Judge Blackwell continued, in the matter of child custody, this court grants full custody to Roman Conway, along with a substantial financial settlement to be paid by the defendants. The gavel fell with a final, decisive crack. It was over. As the bailiffs moved to lead Cassandra and Lewis away, Roman stood. He needed to say something, to find some closure in this moment. Cassandra. Lewis. His voice carried in the sudden hush of the courtroom. They turned to face him, Cassandra's eyes brimming with unshed tears, Lewis's face a mask of sullen defeat. You tried to destroy everything I love, Roman said, his voice steady despite the storm of emotions raging inside him. I'll never forgive your betrayal, but I refuse to let it define me. I'll use this experience to be a better father and a better paramedic. As they were led away, Roman felt a weight lift from his shoulders. It wasn't happiness, not yet, but it was the first step on the road to healing. Outside the courthouse, a crowd of reporters waited, hungry for a statement. Roman brushed past them, ignoring their shouted questions. He had more important things to focus on now. His children were waiting, and he had a lot of lost time to make up for. Epilogue. Months passed, the seasons turning as Chicago slowly recovered from the flu outbreak that had brought the city to its knees. On a crisp autumn morning, Roman stood before a crowd gathered in Millennium Park, his paramedic's uniform crisp and freshly pressed. Mayor Lori Lightfoot approached the podium, her face solemn. Today, we honor those who went above and beyond during our city's darkest hours. Paramedics, nurses, doctors, all the unsung heroes who risked their lives to save others. But one man stands out for his exceptional bravery and dedication. She turned to Roman, a smile breaking through her serious demeanor. Roman Conway, please step forward to receive this commendation for your tireless work during the influenza outbreak. As Roman accepted the award, his eyes scanned the crowd. There was Francisco, grinning from ear to ear and giving him a thumbs up. Dr. Reeves stood nearby, her usual stern expression softened with pride. Arthur nodded approvingly, a rare smile on his face. And there, in the front row, were the faces that mattered most. His children, their eyes shining with a mix of pride and love that made Roman's heart swell. Beside them stood Rosalie, the social worker he'd met at the youth center. She caught his eye and winked, her smile warm and encouraging. As the applause died down, Roman stepped up to the microphone. He looked out over the sea of faces, feeling the weight of all he'd been through, all he'd overcome. Thank you, he began, his voice steady. This award is an honor, but the real heroes are the people of Chicago. The patients who fought so hard to survive. The families who supported them. My fellow first responders who never gave up, no matter how dire things got. He paused, gathering his thoughts. The past year has been challenging, to say the least. There were times when I thought I'd lost everything. My marriage, my children, my career. It all seemed to be slipping away. Roman's gaze fell on his children, their faces a mirror of his own determination. But I learned something important. Our strength isn't measured by the challenges we face, but by how we face them. Every setback, every betrayal, every moment of doubt, they're all opportunities to become better, stronger versions of ourselves. He smiled, feeling a sense of peace settle over him. I stand here today not as a hero, but as a man who's been given a second chance. A chance to be a better father, a better paramedic, a better person. And I promise you this, I won't waste it. As the crowd erupted in cheers, Roman stepped back from the podium. He made his way to his family, scooping up his youngest in a bear hug as the others crowded around. Rosalie squeezed his hand, her eyes shining with pride and something more, a promise of a future filled with love and trust. Roman Conway had walked through fire and come out the other side. He'd lost much, but gained so much more. As he stood there, surrounded by the people he loved, he knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, he was ready to face them. Not alone, but with the strength of family, friends, and a community that had seen him at his lowest and lifted him up. The road ahead wouldn't be easy. There would be difficult conversations with his children, long nights of self-doubt, and the constant challenge of rebuilding trust. But for the first time in a long time, Roman felt truly, deeply hopeful. He had weathered the storm and emerged stronger for it. As the ceremony wound down and the crowd began to disperse, Roman looked out over the Chicago skyline. This city had seen him broken, but it had also seen him rise. Whatever the future held, he was ready for it. One life at a time, one day at a time, Roman Conway would continue to do what he did best, save lives and make a difference. The end.
This is where our story comes to an end. Share your thoughts in the comment section. Thanks for your time. If you enjoy the story, please subscribe to this channel. Click on the video you see on the screen, and I will see you there.
During my gap year from college, I fell deeply in love with a woman I met while working a part-time job. She was about the age of my mother. To this day, I find myself naturally drawn to older women, an inclination I can't seem to avoid. I had taken a year off after my junior year of college. With graduation looming, I faced the daunting prospect of entering the job market unprepared. Having focused solely on my studies up until then, I decided to take a break to prepare for certification and catch up on my studies. During my gap year, I lived diligently according to plan, meeting up with friends who were also taking time off, encouraging each other along the way. Once I had accomplished what I set out to do, I found myself with some spare time. That's when my aunt, who owned a restaurant a couple of hours away from our house, reached out, knowing I was preparing to return to school. She asked for my help with the restaurant. Despite the restaurant's reputation as a culinary destination, attracting customers from far and wide, I hesitated, anticipating the hard work it entailed. However, the promise of being paid as well as a long-standing employee convinced me to pack my bags and head to her town. Working in the restaurant was relentless. It was financially rewarding but physically demanding. The work never seemed to end, from cleaning, ordering and preparing ingredients, washing dishes, greeting customers, managing reviews, to overseeing staff. My aunt worked tirelessly. I primarily served tables, a task made easier by my previous experience in the field. I was quick to respond to customers' calls. My aunt prioritized the staff's health, providing vitamins and treating everyone to a meal on good days, believing that well-treated employees would work harder and provide better service. She was a savvy business owner who knew how to manage people effectively. On rare occasions when the restaurant was empty, we would close early and take a break. She treated her staff like family, always ensuring we had fresh seasonal fruit and snacks. Despite any possible complaints, her efforts led to high sales every day. Now, let me tell you about my aunt Annalise, who left a lasting impression on me. When I arrived at her restaurant, Aunt Annalise was in her late 40s. My aunt worked in the kitchen. I heard she's been on her own since her husband left. She got married young, and her kids are all grown up now, working and living their own lives. She mentioned that her children are financially independent, so she could work just for fun if she wanted, but she's healthy and still wants to work hard as long as she's able. I didn't have any friends at my aunt's restaurant, and after finishing work, I found myself bored. But I knew I'd be going home soon, so instead of trying to make a girlfriend, I just surfed the internet or played some games to cool off. There was this one day at Aunt Annalise's restaurant. After I got used to the restaurant work, I decided to stay overnight in the adjacent living quarters. Aunt Annalise told me I could help myself to the main course leftovers if I got hungry late at night. That evening, I was sitting in the restaurant, drinking beer with my meal. Preparing to close, Aunt Annalise saw me drinking alone and suggested we chat, saying it looked lonely to drink by myself. Aunt Annalise was not only good in the kitchen, but she was also a beauty that would make customers take a second look when she was in the dining area. I thought it was amazing how such a beauty spent her day in front of a hot stove. Aunt Annalise then grabbed several bottles of beer from the fridge and started telling her story. She met her husband in her early 20s and got pregnant, which led to their marriage. The first few years were truly happy. Then one day, a woman called her, claiming she had been with her husband since her late teens, knew about their marriage, and now wanted her man back. It turned out her husband had been seeing another woman all this time, and this woman acted as if she were his wife, which was shocking to Aunt Annalise. Her husband had been leading a double life with this woman since high school. Although they had no children together, Aunt Annalise couldn't bring herself to leave him immediately because of their children, so she endured and lived as if they were still married until the kids were grown. Despite having no other skills to be financially independent, her husband shamelessly spent nights at the other woman's house, while Aunt Annalise did whatever jobs she could to support and educate their children. Thankfully, her daughters grew up well, graduated from college, and landed jobs in reputable companies. The day her youngest daughter got accepted into college, Aunt Annalise threw the divorce papers at her husband. Aunt Annalise's husband left without a word of apology, simply declaring that he was leaving because the kids were grown and he wouldn't be paying child support. He never looked back. Her daughters, still affected by their father's lack of affection, refused to even mention him. After that, Aunt Annalise focused solely on her daughters, and it's been a bit over a year since she started working at the restaurant. She treats her staff incredibly well, often giving unexpected bonuses that really help out with the household expenses. It angers me to think about it leaving such a wonderful woman for a first love. As a man, it feels utterly wrong. After a few drinks, Aunt Annalise broke down, saying she felt like she had been conned. She was in her early 20s, full of energy and beauty, embarking on her first relationship and building a family, only to end up like this. Seeing Aunt Annalise cry her heart out, I didn't know what to do, but ended up holding her hand. Aunt Annalise's restaurant actually consists of 2 buildings, the main one for the restaurant and a small residential building next to it. On days she couldn't go home, she'd stay in the residential building, and sometimes the staff would rest there during breaks. I've stayed over at her place, But sometimes I slept in the residential building too. After calming down, Aunt Annalise said she was heading home, and I was getting ready to stay in the residential building. Then she came knocking, saying she had told a child younger than her own daughter everything and asked me to pretend not to know anything in the future. I agreed, of course. She wanted to go home, but felt too weak and decided to sit for a while. Having had a few relationships in college, I immediately picked up on the signs. We spent the rest of the night together. Since then, we've been exchanging meaningful glances at the restaurant. Our secret known to no one. Aunt Annalise would pretend to leave work, waiting until the staff had gone. And then we'd be together in the residential building. Meeting Aunt Annalise while working part-time has been a real blessing. It's been 4 years now. I've landed a job at my desired company and work hard. On my first payday, I bought Aunt Annalise a scarf that suited her perfectly, and she smiled like a young girl, saying she felt loved. Aunt Annalise, now well into her 50s, still holds a special place in my heart as a beloved woman. With my wedding to my girlfriend 3 months away, I guess it's time to end things with Aunt Annalise, right? I'm not sure how I'll cope with missing her, the woman who matured me during my reckless 20s. But that's a worry for another day.
I cheated on my perfect husband and regret about it, but he didn't forgive me and I lost him forever. My husband, 36-year-old male, and I, 36-year-old female, have been together for 16 years and married for 14. We have 2 daughters who are 13 and 12. About 3 months ago, I cheated on him with my coworker once and immediately regretted it. To be honest, I still haven't figured out the real reason I cheated. On the surface level, the reason would be that my husband was too caught up with work for a couple of months, and I felt neglected and unappreciated at times. I know that isn't the real reason, so I'm trying to figure out what is through individual counseling. I only cheated on him that one time and immediately told him the next day because I couldn't bottle up my guilt and shame. He was shocked at first, but then went on to call me the most horrid names. I deserved it. I deserved a lot more than that. I don't even know how it got to the point of me sleeping with my coworker. It started with innocent flirting, and before I knew it, I made the worst mistake of my life by sleeping with him. I cut off all contact with my coworker and gave up my phone to my husband. I wanted to reassure him that I was willing to make this work on his terms, whatever they were, as long as he would give me another chance. Even though in my heart I knew that I wanted another chance to prove myself, I told him that I would understand if he went through with a divorce. Anyways, I told my husband that I would do anything to regain his trust and express my sorrow and regret for having hurt him so much. My husband has always been the type of guy to give a person only one chance. Even in his friendships, if the trust had been broken, he wouldn't give the other person another chance. He said that he wanted a divorce, but then the whole quarantine thing happened, and he stayed in the house for about 2 months and didn't proceed with the divorce. For the first month, he treated me very coldly, and the only time we talked was when it had to do with our daughters. I slept on the couch and tried to give him as much space as he needed, and only reminded him from time to time that if he ever wanted to work things out, I'd be more than willing to and would be completely devoted to the process of him working things out. He even said some spiteful things during that month and distanced himself from me completely. During the second month, there was a change as he began talking to me again. We talked about daily stuff and even watched movies together with the girls as a family. I felt like he wanted to try reconciling, and I was so happy. I was thrilled that there might be a chance to save my family, to save us. Eventually, through the next couple of days, I could sense us becoming friends all over again. He even invited me to sleep on the bed again. It was really working out, and I reminded him that he could talk about anything he wanted with me. A couple of weeks passed by, and we were getting along even better. We were spending time as a family again and had gotten closer with each other as well. I felt really good about the way things were going, but I wish I'd suggested marriage counseling. I just didn't want to pressure him and have him think that I wanted to sweep this situation under the rug or that I was trying to influence him to not divorce me. One night, we were drinking a bit, just talking in our bedroom, and I felt a genuine connection rebuilding. It felt like we were falling for each other all over again, and it made me so happy. This is the part I regret now. I decided to make a move on him and straddled him while we were laughing at a joke. We looked each other in the eyes, and so naturally I began making out with him. It honestly felt like we were 20 all over again. He kissed me back as well, but after a while, he just started crying. He told me to stop and said that he couldn't. I felt so awful because I felt like he wanted to, but didn't at the same time. It broke my heart to directly see just how badly my stupid decision had hurt him. I told him that I was sorry, and we went to sleep. The reason I say I regret doing this is because I feel like this moment pushed him away forever. 2 days later, he informed me that he wanted to go through with a divorce. He said that he just doesn't think he could make it work, even after trying for the last 2 months. I wanted to fight with him about it, but I just told him that I understood. We had already decided before that if a divorce was to happen, it would be on fair terms. Sure, we'd both have lawyers, but we agreed on a lot of the stuff together. He wanted to take a 2-week trip, but would come back to pick up the girls after his trip. We both mutually agreed that we'd split the time with the girls after his trip. They would spend half of the week with him and the other half with me. I even helped him pack up his stuff, and when we finished, I just bawled my eyes out and we hugged it out. After his 2 weeks trip, he came back, and it felt good seeing him again, but I knew it wasn't the same. He just smiled, and we made small talk before he took the girls. We're both really good parents and want the best for our kids. Today, I got served divorce papers. It hurts so much to know that I lost my best friend because I was stupid. Sometimes I roll over to his side of the bed in the morning, and I hate how I don't feel his body there anymore. I miss his smell, his smile, his voice. I miss him filling up the entire room with his loud, adorable laugh. I miss him so much. The thing that hurts me the most in all of this is knowing how badly I hurt the person I love the most. I wish I could go back in time and undo what I did, but I can't. So now here I am writing about it on Reddit while crying when there's nothing that I can do about it. I wish I could let him see for himself what I genuinely feel in my heart about how sorry I am and about how I would be the most devoted wife ever if he just gave me another chance. To let him know just how much I love him and that I'd literally do anything for him. I ducked up the most perfect thing that ever happened to me. I wish I could get him back, but I know that I lost him forever. Cheating wife whom I caught with AP in my car got crazy when I kicked him and threw my wedding ring in her face. Together almost 7 years, married for just over 1. She dated him, ages 18 to 22, then someone else for a couple of years, then me, 2012 until now. We are 31. He's 40-ish. We do everything together, including running a successful small business. Our friend group makes fun of how perfect our falling in love story is, and other than this problem, it has been a very happy, fun, successful relationship. Over the years, she saw him occasionally, birthdays, holidays, etc., maybe once every couple months, always for an hour or two, dinner or coffee. I never, not once, saw him. He is married and has a child, and always hid from his wife he was hanging out with my wife. Note, he cheated on my wife several times while they were dating, so I have always been baffled why she wanted to keep in contact with him. He also was in a serious accident where she rehabilitated him, feeding him in bed for months, and then he cheated on her again as soon as he was back on his feet. He also made her clean his entire house all the time and inspected her work. She doesn't have many friends, so she always said it was nice to meet up with an old friend who shares history. Whatever, I didn't think much of it at first, and I trusted her. even though I disagreed with her. So one day, a couple of years in, I see her phone light up from the coffee table. He texted her. I glance, and it is a super sexual kind of joke. I freak out inside. I talk to her about it and say it is very inappropriate, yada yada. She says she'll talk to him and it will never happen again. I write it off as him being a dirtbag. Few months later, it happens again. Now I am very freaking right out. So I start reading through her texts while she's asleep because, as embarrassing and gross as it is, I need to know. Lots of sexual jokes or general remember that time. Also, texts being critical of me. I wake her up screaming, saying she can never see him again if this continues. She doesn't see him for several months. Somehow, over the next year or so, she talks me into being okay with it again. His cat dies. We need real estate advice. He's in that line of work. I don't know, whatever. I say, okay, because it's been like a year. This is around year 4 or 5. It seems fine and normal for a while, but I keep reading the texts because gross. I find some more sleazy jokes. I snap and say, for real, this is the last time. Now, a year later, somehow once again, I come around to allowing them to hang out, but I am not happy about it. And I must add, I have been vehemently not happy about it, and telling her so. And it is our sole problem, and it always comes up how much I hate him. But I love her, so I let her. And it's only every couple of months or so whatever. Anyway, flash forward to the last couple of months. I notice they are talking way more often, lots of phone calls and texts. We have each other's locations because we are married and she insisted. I never look. But now I start to look. I check a few weeks ago. She's at an address I don't recognize. Call her to see what's up. She sounds odd, says she's at a friend's house. I know where this person lives, and it is not the location she is currently at. So I say hello to X's name for me, assuming that's what she is doing. She rushes home. She is so scared that she was caught hanging out with him and in a lie. She is so scared she starts puking and doesn't sleep all night. I am mad as hell, but I forgive her. We are fine for a couple of weeks. She is still texting with him lots. We work a lot all week together and have fun. He is around in her life enough over the years that I can't help thinking of him often and comparing myself to him. He is super rich. I'm definitely not. Thoughts of them pop in my mind, of them being together, even while we are being intimate. I tell my mind to duck off, but it keeps happening. I am losing trust. After dropping her off at home after work, I go back to do more work, mentioning I'll be out until 2 a.m. or so. I get tired and come home early thinking we could just watch Netflix. She isn't home, even though I just spoke with her. I check her location, and she is nearby his house. The location updates. She is on the way home. I see the dot stop at the top of the street. I wait 10 or so minutes. I walk up our street expecting to just surprise them, meet him for the first time, introduce myself very awkwardly, and then ask her why she is lying about seeing him. As I walk closer, I don't see two silhouettes. I get closer and find them in his car, but she's on his lap, kissing him, arms wrapped around him. I pause for a few seconds in shock. I open his door fast. I scream, hit him in the face. He looks scared and confused. I throw my ring onto his dash and scream some sort of speech, storm away back home, grab clothes, and drive 2 hours north to stay at my dad's. I think of all the times they must have been together. How could it be possible that the only time I have ever seen his face, they are kissing? Out of the dozens and dozens of times I have let them get together, it can't just be the one time, right? I come back to town. We talk. I yell and scream and break stuff, smash a chair, asking for the truth. She says she also kissed him when his cat passed 4 years ago, but those were the only 2 times, and they were because she was trying to make him happy. My trust is shattered. I don't believe those could be the only 2 times, after all the sexual, joking texts And I mean, we are adults, who the duck only just makes out for a bit. Even if that is the truth, I have told her for years that he is trying to be more than a friend. She always just brushed it off and continues to convince me that they are just friends and it's no big deal, even though she knew I really didn't want her to see him. Even all of her friends and family have continuously scolded her for seeing him after what he did to her. Considering all that, and the fact that she cheated on me 4 years ago when his cat passed, like, how dare she? Anyway, I've read online that couples counseling and one-on-one counseling is the only way to get out of this alive. But to be honest, I'm not feeling very hopeful. This was a building problem over years, my only problem with her, and it exploded. I am not a bad person. I have been in one fight my entire life, in grade 7, and now I have hit a man in the face. I just don't know if I believe her. She deleted him off everything and promised she will never see him again, but who knows how long that will last. I guess she just never got over him and just lied to herself, thinking it was just a friendship, and would do anything to get that attention from him. Anyway, anybody else gone through this? What do I do? I hate that I'm posting this. I just don't want our friends to know.
I ended my wife's affair after she brazenly flaunted her infidelity and tried to justify it. Yep, this is it, the perfect evening. Legs up, beer in hand, ebook beside me but untouched. Just chilling, needing nothing but a sip of beer. It's a much-needed moment of calm, just being, especially alone. Solitude is all I crave right now. The sun setting, warm colors painting the sky, the sea like glass, no wind, no noise, just serenity. My yacht is anchored in a secluded bay off a Greek rock island, small but perfect, with no one around and good anchorage. Anchoring the yacht was tricky, needing a second mooring point in the tiny bay, but manual labor is a welcome change after a lazy day sailing. Now everything's set, the beer's cold, and silence reigns. But then thoughts of Julia intrude, always when I'm idle. It's a struggle I can't shake. I rarely dwell on the good times, doubting their authenticity. I used to think I was in love, but now I see it differently. Her love seemed genuine, but maybe it was just a performance. Anger bubbles up, but I push it away, focus on the sea, the sun, the pigeons. Underrated creatures to watch. Just relax. Deciding to recheck the moorings, though unnecessary, distracts me from thoughts of betrayal. I plunge into the sea impulsively to clear my mind, avoiding the rage that's consumed me lately, isolating myself to spare others from my outbursts. My sister warned I was a ticking time bomb, prompting my hermit lifestyle. Luxury yacht over a cave for sanity's sake. Back on board, I cook to occupy myself. Julia's absence in the kitchen echoes her absence in our partnership. Focusing on making an omelet, I appreciate the solitude of this public spot, rarely visited by others, enhancing its appeal. Enjoying a silent dinner on deck, the tranquility intensifies with the fading daylight, cliffs glowing in the sun's last rays. Suddenly, a motor disrupts the peace, signaling an unwelcome intrusion. A loud motor yacht is approaching, my serene night shattered. I'm stuck with rowdy partygoers, too late and dark to escape to another island. As the yacht nears, it looms larger and more unattractive, blasting techno music. The approaching man, clad in a black suit, sticks out in the Aegean setting. Shouting over the music, he identifies the yacht as Fulvio Brioni, fashion royalty, demanding I move my tiny boat for privacy. I chuckle, refusing to budge. This is public property and I was here first. Irritation brews, but I maintain composure. His attempt to provoke me fails as I dismiss him. He retreats, his mission unsuccessful. I focus on my beer until he returns, offering $10,000 to move. I find it amusing and dismiss his offer with a curt remark. He leaves again. Later, their ship relocates to a nearby spot uncomfortably close. I try to stay calm, treating the spectacle as free entertainment. Their ship resembles a circus with brightly lit decks. Some passengers behave oddly with men, strutting, and women in high heels and bikinis. I wonder what kind of deck they have. I'd never allow high heels on my teak deck, but they seem standard on this ship, along with their pretentious attitude. Men preen while women serve as decoration. Their behavior baffles me. They likely hold a low opinion of me as if we're from different planets. In addition to peacocks and bikini-clad women, There are men in black suits, clearly bodyguards, and crew members in white uniforms. The models, some merely slim and others alarmingly thin, resemble a gathering of malnourished individuals. Occasionally they glance down at me on my boat, highlighting our stark differences. They, entrenched in their glamorous world, likely deem themselves important, hosting influential figures. Meanwhile, I'm just a solitary guy with a beer, though I believe my life is better than theirs. I ponder what the women on board are contemplating. Perhaps seeking wealthy partners for status and security before aging out of their careers at a mere 22. I realize I'm ignorant of their world. How long can models work? 20, 30, 40? I have no clue. I reflect on Julia's deceitful intentions to marry and divorce a wealthy man, myself included. Her betrayal still stings deeply, shaping my life in a negative light. The present distraction arises from a commotion on a nearby yacht where a woman clashes with a group of men, including Bryony, easily identifiable as the overweight figure among them. His bodyguard hovers nearby, tension thickening as if violence looms. Their sudden awareness of my presence halts their confrontation, prompting me to offer a casual salute with my beer. They retreat inside, leaving the woman to fend for herself. Her futile resistance against them draws no sympathy from the onlookers, shocking me with their callous indifference. Trapped on their boat with no help in sight, she faces their aggression alone. As she tries to flee, the men close in, assured of their dominance. Helpless, she pleads with the other passengers, but they ignore her cries, complicit in her plight. Witnessing their greedy behavior sickens me, stirring a desire to intervene, though I'm unsure how. Despite her desperate pleas, the bystanders remain silent, turning a blind eye to her distress. Just as I consider grabbing my camera, the girl unexpectedly leaps overboard, surprising everyone, myself included. Despite the height of the fall, she lands gracefully, even in her high heels. It's a bold move, but it won't save her, there's nowhere to go. However, she swims toward me, still elegant, though I'm no longer admiring the sight. She's encroaching on my personal space. Should I send her back to those creeps? That's not an option. I couldn't live with myself. The alternative, take her in, sacrifice my cherished solitude, and worse, endure the company of a woman. I swore I'd never do that again. Just what I don't need right now. A woman at my side, likely a model. Spoiled and entitled, I can almost hear her complaints already. Are there places in the world without women? A convent, maybe. Could I join in Gregorian chant? Are those monks truly eunuchs, or do they just seem that way? She's still swimming toward me. Damn damsel in distress, potential female company. I'm panicking. It's too late to anchor now and I can't refuse her boarding. She looks like she's in trouble. Fine, I'll take her to the nearest port tomorrow. As she reaches the gangway, I assist her, though it doesn't mean I'll engage in much conversation. Women aren't good for me. I need to keep my distance to avoid getting hurt again. This decision calms me a bit. I won't let another woman ruin my composure after months of regaining it. She looks at me questioningly, and I offer my hand without speaking. I may have a guest, but I won't chat all day. The situation is clear. She knows I witnessed the scene on Bryony's ship, and my gesture signals my willingness to help. Wait, she's still wearing heels. As she steps onto my teak deck, I gesture to her shoes, and she quickly understands. Oh, sure, sorry, she apologizes, removing them. My name is Anna, by the way. Mark, damn, only a few seconds in female company and I'm already fumbling. She extends her hand again. Our first handshake doesn't seem to count, as I was only helping her aboard. I understand her gesture and shake her hand, a blend of greeting and gratitude. As she stands, she takes her time, subtly showing me her presence in my space, perhaps allowing me to adjust to her unexpected intrusion. It's a thoughtful act after imposing herself on me. I wonder why a woman with any semblance of sensitivity was aboard that ship, though I dread hearing her story eventually. My new guest, Anna, is stunningly beautiful, fitting for one of Bryony's companions. Surprisingly, she's not as young as I assumed, likely in her early 22nd, only a few years younger than me. Anna isn't just attractive, she's downright beautiful, with sharp features and perfect green eyes. Despite her slender frame, she doesn't appear malnourished like some of the others. Her long, damp hair obscures its true color, but it's undeniably luscious. Compared to Anna, Julia pales in comparison, making me realize how out of my league she truly is. A few years back, encountering such genetic fortune would have thrilled me, but I've since resolved to exclude women from my life. Preparing myself thoroughly, though Julia's betrayal motivates this decision, I can still admire this woman's beauty, much like I would a butterfly or a flower. However, she doesn't stir any emotions in me, or so I keep telling myself. After a brief pause to assess her, she meets my gaze again, thanking me with a hint of insecurity. Surprising me, women like her aren't supposed to be timid. They're expected to take what they want and move on. Yet, it's clear she genuinely needs my help, and much depends on my response. I grunt, signaling that conversation isn't on my agenda. She looks at me puzzled before accepting the towel I offer. Eventually, she smiles, likely pegging me as a grumpy sea dog, which suits me fine. It's not far from the truth. Glancing at the brightly lit ship, I observe Bryony in animated discussion with his bodyguards. Perhaps he's contemplating boarding my yacht to retrieve the girl. Piracy in Greek waters would spell trouble even for someone like Bryony, especially for a woman he could easily replace. He's likely accustomed to success in every endeavor, down to a game of scissors. But what do I know? I remind myself not to delve too deeply. I need to keep these odd characters out of my life. I glance back to find her gazing at the scene, her expression now concerned rather than arrogant. "I hope that fat fool doesn't send his goons to snatch me," she murmurs. "He might. He's got 4 bodyguards he could sick on us. Maybe we'll swim away tomorrow," I respond dismissively, keeping my tone curt to maintain distance. "Okay, I can't say I'll sleep well. I'm still a little worried. Thanks again for saving me. They were just about to maltreat me," she says. Her nonchalance about my brief responses surprises me. "They?" I blurt out before reining in my curiosity. "Yes, Bryony, his male guests, his bodyguards, and all the male crew," she reveals. It seems he made a bet that he and all the other men on the ship would entertain every girl at least once before the ship returned to Italy. All the other girls weren't thrilled about it, but he let them do it anyway. Well, suddenly I just couldn't take it anymore. Something broke inside me. I've put up with a lot of things without getting anything for it, but today it became too much.
Damn it, yes, I said no to Fulvio Brioni, and one little dive, and my career went down the drain.
That part of my life is now in the past. She looks surprised at her own revelation. I nod and emit a grunt, trying to sound sympathetic. "For all that I look so beautiful, this fashion business is total crap," she remarks. "Yeah, you're right," she continues, even though I remain silent. "Maybe it's even better this way. There's nothing I can do about it now, right? Leave the old crap behind, try something new opportunities will arise. Life is about change." Her unexpected optimism returns. How can she brush off something that completely shattered her perceived life? I wish I could, or can I? Hungry. Really, I'm always hungry. It's part of my job. I've been hungry for 10 years, she remarks, laughing. It's enchanting. Damn, what a woman. No, stop it, you fool. Okay, just stop it. To distract myself, I head below deck to prepare scrambled eggs for her. She follows, glancing around as I silently pass her a plate of omelets. It's surprisingly difficult to maintain a solemn mood with her presence, but it's necessary. There's no point in allowing myself to become fond of her, and I'm certain nothing good will come of it. "Oh yes, that looks very appetizing, thank you. Do you live here alone?" she inquires. I nod, striving to limit my interaction with her to a bare minimum to avoid being influenced by her cheerful demeanor. "Do you have any clothes I could borrow? I haven't had time to pack," she asks, her smile returning. She's still stunning. I nod, fetching clothes from my aft cabin. I can't keep scowling when faced with that smile for long. "Take one of the forward cabins," I instruct, handing her the clothes. "Thank you. Are they all free?" she queries. I nod once more. "Why does a man like you live all alone? How do you keep women at a distance?" she asks. "What?" The sheer shock on my face prompts her melodic laugh again before she takes pity on my confusion. "Never mind, I'm going to change. It's a little cold in this wet bikini," she states, her smile warmer than that of a haughty mannequin. Turning, she heads forward, leaving me staring after her. She's just as stunning from behind as she is from the front. I shake my head, trying to comprehend her words. Julia always insisted I was just an ordinary guy, nothing special or attractive about me. I was fortunate to have her, she claimed, and I believed her. Now, this incredibly beautiful woman, a genuine model, was asking me how I keep women at bay. I suppose I have a bit of time while she changes to ponder this question. 2 minutes later, she approaches, somehow making my old worn sweatpants look better than they should. Being a model, she changes swiftly, contrasting with Julia's leisurely pace. I find myself amused at the thought of a woman dressing quickly. "Hey, you might have a friendly face. I don't think you're as much of a grump as you're trying to seem," she remarks, almost coaxing a smile from me. It's kind of working. As her hair dries, revealing her brunette locks, I silently scold myself. "Would you mind if I stayed below deck?" "I don't want to remind Fulvio that I'm here," she asks. I affirm, realizing my attempt at brevity sounds absurd even to me. Okay, I'll see you tomorrow. Would you mind if I borrowed your ebook reader? She continues. I nod again, grateful for the retreat to my quarters, relishing the solitude once more. Early morning on deck. I'm always grouchy in the morning. My sole companion, a cup of coffee, doesn't seem to mind. I could linger in bed, but thoughts of Julia would haunt me. Yet, even with her absence, I find solace in my sullen mood, lamenting how life treated me with Julia. The cacophony from Bryony's vessel ceased around 4 in the morning, now resembling a ghost ship. They probably won't stir until noon. But wait, I hear movement below deck. My uninvited guest seems determined to shatter the mental image I formed of her. She's over 20, not buxom, and surprisingly not haughty even when faced with my rudeness. And now she's an early riser. What's next? A certified mechanic. Morning, she greets, popping up from the hatch. Morning, I reply, likely wearing my grumpy expression. Coffee, I grunt. She disappears below deck. She seems just as sharp as I am in the morning, albeit much more pleasant to look at. I turn to the bay, its calm surface now tainted with visions of Julia and her lover mocking me. Damn it. I sense my uninvited companion making her way up on deck. Now that she's had her coffee, she'll be chipper and ready to engage in conversation about topics I couldn't care less about. And she'll flash that gorgeous mannequin smile. Don't forget about that. I don't need anyone trying to lift my spirits. I want to wallow in solitude, don't I? Have that right. Anna. Her name catches me off guard once more. Without a word, she settles beside me on the deck, gazing out at the tranquil sea. The morning air remains crisp, untouched by the scorching Greek sun. Everything feels surreal around her. All I see now is the vast expanse of the sea. Julia has vanished. Silence envelops us until she breaks it with a sudden question. So, what's the deal? You saved me. What do I owe you? Her demeanor hints at apprehension, as if bracing herself for unwelcome news. Has everyone who helped you in the past wanted something in return? I blurt out, regretting my candor. I certainly don't need to delve into her past, but her query catches me off guard. Yeah, pretty much, I confirm. Well, your life must be pretty crappy then, she remarks. Yeah, right, I respond, knowing that any woman as beautiful as her would have men lining up to do her favors. Yes, she replies, her expression serious and her pretty face looking utterly miserable. I glance at her, then look away, unsure of what to say. The silence feels uncomfortable. It dawns on me that leaving before Bryony and his crew wake up is a wise move. Is there anything you need from the ship? I ask softly, surprised at my own gentleness. No, she answers firmly, as if she's relinquishing her life in the world of high fashion and all that it entails. I nod and prepare to depart. I hope she won't insist on helping me, but she remains by the rail, silently gazing at the sea. Does she simply prefer solitude, or has she intuited my desire for it? Either way, she seems to understand me better than I'd like. I tidy up the galley and proceed to work. I coil and stow the mooring lines with ease. Setting the anchor using the winch motor will be noisy and time-consuming, but it's unavoidable. Anna watches anxiously as the noise grows louder, her gaze fixed on the floating brothel. With no wind, I start the diesel engine. I aim to put some distance between us and Bryony's yacht, just in case. The noise of the anchor windlass disturbs anyone on board. As the house-on glides away, Anna visibly relaxes. Surprisingly, she looks even more beautiful, a sight I hadn't anticipated. She sits beside me, serene and content, while I navigate. With Bryony's vessel disappearing from view, I grow weary of the diesel's drone. Hoist the sails and silence the engine. Ah, blissful quiet. Just the wind, the waves, and the sails. I furl the sails and return to the helm once more. A comfortable silence envelops us. I steal glances at her occasionally. She sits calmly, gazing out to sea. With Bryony out of sight, she appears relaxed and serene, as if nothing else matters in the world. It's curious, I muse. She doesn't resemble a woman who just abandoned a career coveted by many. If Julia were in her shoes, not that she ever would be, she'd be anything but serene. She'd be anxious, demanding. But Anna, yes, Anna, no. Except what if Anna views me the way Julia does? What if she thinks I should support her in the lifestyle she's accustomed to simply because I let her come aboard? Perhaps that's why she seems unfazed by everything. Oh, hell, I groan inwardly. Here we go again. Henry Higgins was onto something. Invite a woman into your life and peace of mind vanishes. I'm done with it, once and for all. I glance at her. She turns away, gazing at the sunlit ocean beyond the harbor rail, appearing entirely innocent. Of course, I remind myself, she's a model, or rather, a former model. They can portray any facade they desire. I shift my gaze to the sails, then to starboard. What's her game? My thoughts are interrupted. Hold on, how does she know about that? I stare at her blankly. Well, damn. The morning was nearly perfect, and now she has to spoil it. Nothing, just a regular guy, sure. A good-looking guy, clearly affluent, sailing solo on a fancy yacht, trying to mask his niceness with grunts. What? Handsome. I spotted her first flaw. She definitely needs glasses. It's something we should discuss sometime. We're alone here, and I'm all ears, but I don't want to push. Thanks, darn it. Am I that transparent? Yes, you are. I throw my head back, but she just giggles. I can't help but grin. Darn it, playing defense isn't going so smoothly. All right, I'll take the bait. What's my next move? She even blushes a little. I'm not sure what you're going to say. I know you aim to keep your distance and stay quiet. She takes a deep breath and meets my gaze. There's a determined look on her face, though I think I detect sympathy in her eyes, or am I imagining things? You've been hurt badly. Your instinct is to withdraw and keep everyone at arm's length because you fear getting hurt again. It's normal, it's natural, even animals do it. However, sooner or later you have to turn around and start moving forward. You walk and talk, but you're still wary of getting hurt, especially by women. I get that. But by isolating yourself from others, you're only keeping your pain company. Each time you dwell on your wounds instead of engaging with others, you allow them to hurt you again. Your pain isn't improving, it's worsening, and you don't even receive sympathy because you've cut yourself off from society and no one sees you. I envision myself enduring in dignified solitude, cutting myself off so that no one, especially not a woman, could inflict the same pain as Julia. But what if I'm merely brooding? I decide to lay out my case to her, hoping she'll quiet down so I can think or brood or whatever. Okay, I was married to my childhood best friend, and it all crashed and burned. She cheated, yeah, and in the end, all she cared about was my money. So, you can understand why I'm cautious, especially with women. That should occupy her for a bit, but it didn't. I'm sorry. I figured it was something like that, but you're allowing her to keep hurting you and preventing you from finding happiness. It's a shame to give her that much control over you. You'll have to address this eventually. You can't just bury it all. It's not healthy, and who better to confide in than someone you'll never see again? I'm surprised by her words. It seems she's not flirting with me after all. Don't worry, I know you plan to part ways with me at the next port, so your secrets are safe. She paused. How about I share my story? I ponder for a moment. If she's willing to share her story, it means she's not prying into mine or trying to dredge up Julia's pain. That's unsettling. But what if her ordeal was worse than mine, and yet she managed it better? Then I'd have to open up to this intriguing stranger from a completely different world. What would become of me then? She interrupts my thoughts. Silence resumes. Her grin is infectious, like that of a playful child. I almost smile back, but I catch myself. No attachments, I remind myself. Don't let her ensnare you. Too late, she's still smirking. Damn, she's got me again. I better tread carefully around her. Gradually, her smile fades and her gaze drifts to the distant horizon. She speaks in a steady, monotone voice as if reciting. I grew up in a small town where everyone knew me. Other kids were smarter or more talented, but I was the one expected to make it big, to be famous. You know, when all you can do is look pretty, that means a modeling career. I quickly learned I was at the bottom of the ladder. It was nothing like being a princess in my small town. For the first time, I was told I wasn't good enough, time after time in the harshest terms. She confided in me, her eyes pleading for empathy. Mark, when something you do, like a project or report, is deemed not good enough, it's disheartening. But when you're told you yourself aren't good enough, it's brutal. It really takes a toll on you repeatedly. She paused, turning back to the horizon. Like many models, I began to see my body as separate from myself. It was almost like a tool or a skill set. I did everything to maintain it, exercise, proper diet, you name it. But still, I fell short. I was never chosen. Then I observed the directors, favoring girls they were familiar with, those who socialized with them, or higher-ups. Socializing in reality meant engaging in lovemaking, regardless of the director's gender. It seemed customary. I resisted initially, but the pressure of unemployment became unbearable, so I relented. It wasn't terrible. Most were considerate, even kind. I had grown accustomed to viewing my body as separate from myself. I merely used it to secure a job and while at work. Eventually, I landed a job. Everyone in my hometown celebrated seeing me in catalogs or ads. I felt burdened with the hopes and dreams of the entire village, despite realizing I wouldn't reach the top and growing to despise my life. I persisted. I empathized more with girls in abusive relationships. I'm not sure what triggered my change of heart. I've been on Bryony's cruises before and knew the expectations, but for some reason, whether it was a wager or something else, I had enough. I hid in my cabin until the thugs forcibly removed me. You witnessed the rest. She pauses, meeting my gaze. They didn't think I'd dare to jump. Maybe I wouldn't have, but your boat was nearby, and I overheard your confrontation earlier. I was terrified last night, fearing Bryony would send his thugs after me. I was relieved to be just another disposable beauty. I wonder if I foiled their bet. She smiles at the thought. I smile back, trying to uplift her. It's still hard to fathom that some might see her as merely a pretty face. I'm done. It's all over now. The village will have to find another to celebrate. So what if I'm jobless and broke? I've endured this before and survived. I'll never sell my body again, or let others dictate my worth. I don't know what's next, but whatever it is, I know it will be better because I'm free. She grins at me, and I'm taken aback by her even more radiant expression. So, now you think I'm a courtesan? Her smile remains, her eyes shining like stars. What can I even say to that? Thankfully, she's likely accustomed to rendering men speechless with her charm. I stumble through some vague notions about choice and honesty, hoping she'll rescue me. In a way, I'm a maid. I'm stunned, and she laughs again, confirming my enjoyment of her laughter. Remember when I said I began to see my body as separate from my heart, the real me? So yes, men and women used my body, and yes, sometimes I found pleasure in it. But I never truly made love. I never shared my heart. She gazes at me earnestly before continuing. All I ever wanted was what my mother had, a tranquil life with a loving partner and a home filled with affection. For a while I lost sight of that, but not anymore. Her determination and optimism leave me feeling inadequate. I retreat downstairs to conceal my emotions, returning with 2 glasses of chilled Sauvignon Blanc. We raise a toast to her future, and it strikes me that it's not just her physical beauty that captivates me, but her essence. I decide to divulge my story to distract myself. You? Yes, I'm eager to hear your story, she replies, still smiling. Am I really that transparent? I ask. Yes, indeed, but I still want to hear it, she assures me. How does she do it? Well, we'll address that later. Let's get started. I met Julia on my first day of school. Some bullies were teasing her, so I stepped in. We became close, with her helping me academically and me protecting her. Money didn't matter at 6. We were inseparable. Julia blossomed into a popular beauty, and she didn't want me fighting off boys anymore, despite our friendship. People, even my mom, thought she was out of my league. Your mother? Anna's voice carries horror. That's awful and wrong. Maybe, but it still affects me, I admit, even now. Your mom must have been mistaken or intoxicated, got you confused with someone else. Hey, don't speak ill of my mother, I warn, though Anna sees through my facade and laughs. I join in before continuing. We attended the same university. Julia reached out, reminiscing about feeling safe with me. She hinted that I had a chance with her. I was thrilled and proposed. She said yes, but my happiness shattered when I found her in bed with another man. I didn't confront them. I just retreated to my office, nursing my wounds. She nods, expecting my agreement. She cried, apologized, promised faithfulness. I relented because I wanted her back. So you forgave her? Anna asks. Yes, I did, I affirm. I might have forgiven one mistake, but she didn't keep her word. Anna ponders. Did she have money when you wed? No, why? You mentioned she went after your money post-divorce. Just a thought. What if she thought your wealth meant power in the relationship? Maybe she felt insecure. But I loved her, cared for her. Why insecure? Perhaps dependent is better, Anna suggests. Maybe her cheating aimed to shift power dynamics, make you reliant on her. Are you excusing her? I ask, slightly defensive. No, breaking promises like that has no excuse. I think of you trapped, not in pain, but not happy. To live again, you need to understand her cruelty. How do you know all this? I feign sarcasm, but she's earnest. I don't know, I guess I just empathize. She smiles sadly, then looks at me. Go ahead, what happened next? I pause, preparing to recount the downfall of my world. It began with a mundane snooker night, disrupted by a power outage. Instead of joining my buddies for drinks, I opted for a cozy evening with my wife at home. Entering our apartment, I discovered a candlelit ambiance and soft music, a shared indulgence. Apparently, one of my friends had tipped Julia off. As I fetched candles for the bathtub, I stumbled upon a scene, Julia and a man exchanging kisses and bubbles. I stood there, unsure how to react, eventually clearing my throat for attention. They turned, unfazed, greeting me with smiles. Andy, the man, introduced himself warmly in that soapy embrace. Reality hit. I witnessed the demise of my marriage, the end of my love. Overwhelmed, I fought back tears. They reassured me, claiming love unchanged, the situation inconsequential. Julia even suggested continuing the affair, asserting her affection for us both. Stunned, I stood silent, grappling with disbelief. Julia smiled, unfazed by my reaction. "Mark, I've realized I love two men," she began, her tone matter-of-fact. "Andy's accepted it, and I know you will too when you see how happy we all are. I'll still be with you most of the time, but now that you know, I'll spend some nights with Andy. When you're out with your friends, you won't even notice. And when we start a family, Andy will use protection to ensure the kids are yours, right, Andy?" Andy eagerly agreed, nodding along. "Our marriage will be stronger this way," she insisted. "What about your promise to be faithful?" I interjected. "Oh, that," she brushed it off. "I was a bit quick to promise. Besides, I hadn't met Andy yet." "Does that justify breaking your promise?" I pressed. "Mark, don't be melodramatic," she retorted. "Think about it. Andy and I have been dating for over 2 months now. Has your love for me diminished? No. You've even enjoyed better lovemaking since I've been seeing Andy. He's different from you, spontaneous and unpredictable. But you're still the better lover because you know me so well. It shouldn't be a problem, unless you make it one." She showed no remorse, demanding I accept her affair. Her vow of fidelity seemed meaningless. As I looked at her and Andy smiling together, pain crept into my heart. "What if I don't agree?" Her smile now held a hint of reproach. "I hate to say this, Mark, but you need to know the consequences. If you divorce me over this, I'll protect Andy and myself. I'll ensure I get at least half of everything you own. I hope it never comes to that, but I'll do what I have to." She softened her tone. "Remember, I've loved you since you were 6. The choice shouldn't be difficult. Keep enjoying what you have or risk losing me and half your assets." With warm smiles, she and Andy invited me to accept my betrayal. I must have looked as dumbfounded as a cartoon character punched with a brick. Andy chimed in, inviting me to join them. Julia playfully urged me to stay, blowing water at me and kissing Andy on the nose. "I'm done," I said, walking away. Their soft chatter followed as I left, but I was too consumed by the situation to pay attention. I packed an overnight bag and left. It wasn't until later, alone in a hotel room, that I fully processed what had happened. I cried, cursed, and pounded the mattress in frustration. When I woke up, Julia was no longer the woman I loved, she was my enemy. Protecting my assets became my priority. Even if I didn't need the money, it was a matter of principle, not paying her for her betrayal. I had a significant advantage, unknown to my spouse. My wealth wasn't truly mine, it came from a trust fund set up by my clever grandfather. He had a cynical view of women and devised a plan. I'd receive a monthly allowance until age 40 or after my first divorce, at which point the full fortune would be mine. Legally, I had almost no assets when Julia ended our marriage. Ironically, the divorce was meant to make me wealthy. I consulted a family lawyer immediately. He assured me that the worst-case scenario would be minimal alimony for a short period. Reluctantly, I accepted this outcome. He handled the legalities, ensuring Julia couldn't flee, and initiated the divorce process. He predicted things would get interesting once Julia realized the new reality. Meanwhile, I rented a nice apartment and moved my essentials. Julia didn't reach out for a week, then sent a message asking if I'd gotten over my hurt feelings and was ready to return home. I didn't respond. Despite her professed love, she didn't seem to miss me. 2 weeks later, the flood of texts and messages began. It seemed her lawyer had informed her that she wouldn't be as wealthy as she'd expected. She oscillated between professing love, claiming misunderstandings, and urging me to be brave. After all, Andy had tolerated it, why couldn't I? Suddenly, everything came to a halt. A few days later, her lawyer presented a post-nuptial agreement claiming I signed it, offering her $220. $0,000 a month for life in case of divorce. However, handwriting experts discredited Julia's claim. They then attempted to accuse me of domestic violence, but failed to provide evidence. Eventually, they settled for what we proposed, $2,000 a month for a year and legal fees. I emerged victorious, yet felt awful, avoiding women like the plague and retreating into seclusion. "I'm leaving," I announced, breaking the silence. Anna remains quiet. I glance at her, seeing tears streaming down her face. "You know what? She's still beautiful, I think." "I'm deeply sorry, Mark. I understand your pain," Anna responds. Strangely, after recounting the ordeal, my anguish lessened unbeknownst to me. "But Mark, you can't continue like this. She's not worth your life. She never cared about your happiness, and you're letting her bring you down," Anna says, her words carrying strength and determination, etched on her face as tears dry on her cheeks. "Mark, you have to live. Allowing her to destroy you is letting her win. I flinch, sensing the severity of her words. She pauses, allowing me time to ponder before interjecting into my thoughts. So you're a hermit? Her playful smile returns, accompanied by a glint in her eyes. Yeah, I suppose so. Yesterday, I might have embraced that label proudly. Today, I'm not so sure. At least you're not one of those bushy-bearded types, she teases. Thankfully, no, I reply. Promise me you'll move past this soon. You need to start living again, Mark, she urges gently, her caring tone resonating with me, leaving me speechless as I nod in response. She shifts focus. Good, she remarks. Now that's settled, I'll catch some sun. Her smile teases yet invites as she gracefully rises and heads to the bow. Did people really tell her she wasn't pretty enough? Unbelievable, I think, joining her to admire the view. As she settles near the mast, using my sweatpants as a cushion, I can't deny her allure. She exudes perfection, even without a camera to capture it. Yet, there's more to her than meets the eye. Her kindness is genuine, a rarity. She empathized when I spoke of Julia, easing my pain. Is she psychic? I hope not. Despite knowing me for less than 24 hours, she understands me deeply. But is she right about me? Should I abandon my isolation? I can't risk another ordeal like Julia. Yet, if I'm allowing her to slowly destroy me, as Anna suggested, what's the difference? Watching Anna, who's left her past behind like I have, albeit more dramatically, I see her eagerness to embrace life despite uncertainty. Her attitude is infectious. In her presence, my fear of living diminishes. With her, I feel she's way out of my league. Maybe there's someone like Anna but less stunning to build a life with. My imagination wanders as I watch Anna's smooth belly and nearly exposed bosom. Mark, damn, she caught my eye despite the sunglasses. Where are we going? She asks indifferently. Naxos, I reply. So this is where you were going to leave me? She smirks, rolling onto her back and removing her sunglasses. No, I won't leave you, but it's not like I want to, I respond, flustered. She laughs. Sorry, Mark, I shouldn't have. I just miss having someone to tease, to have fun with. Forgive me? I smile and nod, willing to forgive her anything. Then the nagging voice reminds me of women's capabilities. No, Mark, I'm not, she assures softly, sensing my unease. I wonder if I can read her. What's happening here? So I'll leave the boat on Naxos, I ask. No, unless you want to or need to, but you can if you want. I really like you here, but I wouldn't, she replies. Oh crap, you can stay as long as you want, she adds, enjoying my stuttering. I take a deep breath. I was planning on stopping there anyway for supplies, and you might want to get some clothes. That's my plan. What's the matter, sailor? Not enjoying the view? She poses like a glamour girl, teasing. She laughs, then gets serious. I don't have money or debit cards, and I may not be able to pay you back right away. I pretend to think as I approach her. Maybe I'll find a way for you to pay me back. I keep a straight face, making her apprehensive. How are your knots? I ask, still serious. She hesitates. What's with the knots? Her voice trembles. Sailor knots. This boat doesn't sail itself. Since you're here, you might as well help. I smile. She laughs and slaps my arm. I got you, didn't I? I enjoy teasing her. Looks like someone else needs some light-hearted fun. She smiles back at me. We sit facing each other on the foredeck. I teach her some knots as the sail shields us from the Greek sun. It's hot, so I remove my shirt. Occasionally, we exchange glances and smile. It's odd to have someone like her look at me like that, but not so strange that I can't get used to it. I haven't felt this relaxed around a woman in a while. We practice trimming the foresail, more for the experience. She's surprisingly athletic, and watching her move is enjoyable. My bikini-clad companion helps me unmoor the house on, making us the envy of the waterfront. She follows my instructions flawlessly, seeming like a natural. If I once thought she was just a brainless model, I now know better. She borrows my sweatpants, and we head into town. Our first stop is the bank, and as expected, Anna can't access her accounts without proper identification, so she shops using my funds. I half expect her to indulge in stereotypical shopping sprees, but she surprises me by purchasing a few sundresses, shorts, and tops, seeking my advice on footwear. Her choices are tasteful and of good quality. While she shops for undergarments, I gather groceries and supplies. By the time we reconvene at the town square, we're both loaded with our purchases. From the docks, I grin, watching her in my sweatpants under the midday sun. Now in a light sundress, she looks stunning, laughing as I stare. Surely half of Naxos envies me. We board, store our purchases, and relax. Every time I think I'm accustomed to her beauty, Anna surprises me with a different look or demeanor, leaving me stunned. "Thank you, Mark," she says. "I'll repay you with my savings." "Maybe hold on to them until you find a job or something," I suggest. "Well, maybe, but I don't like owing my friends," she replies with a soft smile. Her eyes are warm, and I feel overwhelmed. "We're friends," she reiterates. "Friends help each other like you did for me last night, even when you didn't want to." We both acknowledge she's right. Friends don't hurt each other. And no matter what, Mark, I won't hurt you, ever. You know, we're at ease with each other. I can't recall the last time I felt that way with a man. No expectations, no pressure, just friends. "When was that?" she muses. "You're feeling comfortable with me too. One more thing, you know how I always seem to know what you're thinking? How can I read you? You're the only person I can do that with," she adds. Damn, I try to feign disappointment. I was hoping you could read everyone like that, and we could rule the world. We chuckle, and she gazes at me. "So, friend, what are the plans for tonight?" she asks. "Well, friend," the word slips out before I can stop it, surprising me, but it's fitting. I'm not one. Or to plan. "Good," she says, smiling, "because I have one, and it's perfect. You're taking me ashore to that nice seafood place we spotted, and we'll have a wonderful dinner together." "And then?" I inquire. "After dinner, we'll head back to the boat, and I'll fill you in on the rest," she responds. We dine ashore at a humble seafood spot. I briefly worry if Anna might feel out of place, but the restaurant's long-standing reputation reassures me. Despite the stares, Anna comforts me, unperturbed by the attention. We enjoy a leisurely meal, and the owner's visits feel more like genuine hospitality than curiosity. The fresh seafood delights us both, and I'm surprised to find myself having a good time. As we leave, Anna's hand in mine, we stroll along the waterfront before returning to the house on. Anna's kiss is gentle, her gratitude palpable. "Thank you," she whispers softly. "I can't remember the last time I enjoyed a night so much." She glances away briefly to conceal her tears. After a pause, she turns back to me, flashing a cunning smile. "So, ready for the rest of the plan?" she asks. "Yeah, I suppose," I reply, and she chuckles. "Sure about that?" She winks, arching an eyebrow. Her earlier words echo in my mind. "Promise me you'll start living again, Mark." "Okay, I'm game. What's the deal?" I adopt a confident stance, hands on hips. "Is this where you seduce me?" "Huh?" My eyes widen, mouth agape, hands dropping to my sides. "Seduce?" "You know, when I..." "And then you..." She grins at me, making me feel awkward. I mutter something in response, and she giggles. "Well, part of you understands, right?" Her gaze falls to the noticeable bulge in my pants. Oh no, she hasn't even touched me, yet I'm already aroused. "Anna, I thought you didn't want to rush into things," I say. "Don't worry, Mark. Lovemaking isn't on the agenda," she reassures. "Huh?" It seems to be my go-to response. "We're going to make love," she declares, her eyes serious, her smile sweet, radiating warmth. I feel myself falling for her. "Anna, you could have anyone. Why me?" I ask. "We're falling for each other, haven't you noticed?" she replies. Panic grips me once more. "Mark, I'm not Julia. I could never hurt you like she did." Her tone is soft but earnest, and I believe her. Without a word, she grabs my shirt, pulling me close for a kiss. It's incredible, almost magical, like nothing I've experienced before. When we part, I see tears in her eyes, and surprisingly, my own eyes grow moist too. Our connection feels almost overwhelming. She stands still, holding onto my shirt tightly, and pulls me towards my quarters, urgency in her movements. Then she pushes me onto the bed. "You're so beautiful," I manage to say, still processing what just happened. Why me? Was it my wealth? I can't think of any other reason. Suddenly, I lift my head to look at her. She's watching me, a satisfied expression on her face. "No, Mark, no. I love you, not your money. Don't misunderstand, money's helpful, sure, but using a man for it repulses me," she explains. "I'll sign anything, a prenup, no problem," I offer, trying to lighten the mood. "A prenup? Well, why not? Just in case we tie the knot someday." "You never know," she replies with a sly grin, and after a moment, I can't help but chuckle. It seems my destiny is already set. Well, it could be worse. Am I crazy? And even if you hadn't thought about it, I'm on birth control pills. "You're actually the first guy I've been with without protection, so you're in the clear," she adds. "Wow, what a fool I've been," I mutter, feeling a mix of embarrassment and relief. She laughs at my reaction. "You're too kind, Mark." Mark, we need to figure out our next move." "Well, the home port of the ship is on T-base, though I'm not sure that's what you meant." "Okay, do you have a car there?" I inquire. "Yes, a big X5, she replies. "Okay, so it's one of those SUVs, right?" We'll drive to Milan from there. If you're okay with it, we can swing by and grab my stuff, the remnants of my old life, I suggest. Sure thing, plus it's pretty much on the way to Germany, she agrees. All right, we're going to have a blast. I've got a lot of work ahead, and I'm looking forward to it, I say. Your job? She asks. Yeah, I've got to convince this guy that good women are out there, I explain. Oh, so you're opening up to the female population again? She teases. What? Are you joking? I respond. Absolutely not. My motives are purely selfish. It all seems too good to be true, she admits. The 4 weeks sailing back to Antibes were idyllic, filled with endless lovemaking, sun-soaked days, and culinary delights. We deliberately steered clear of discussions about the future, divorces, or our past, focusing only on the present. Upon arrival, we packed up the boat and loaded my car in silence, both dreading the return to reality. The journey back to Milan and then Germany was tense, with unspoken fears looming over us. I feared losing her again, having fallen deeply in love, while she seemed distant. Back in my apartment, the spark we shared on the yacht seemed to fade, replaced by an underlying tension. Despite the satisfying closeness, we both felt a strain. I contemplated returning to the yacht to salvage our relationship, unsure of how to prevent its demise. As we sat watching TV, I found her snuggled against me, reminding me of her allure. Just as I considered retreating to the bedroom, the doorbell interrupted our thoughts. Anna still refused to answer the door or phone in my apartment, and it was starting to bother me because it indicated she's not quite comfortable here yet. All right, Anna, I'll get it. Thank you. I opened the door and found my nightmare standing there. Julia, dressed to the nines, looked stunning yet sinister. Oh, honey, you finally arrived, she exclaimed, rushing over to me. I felt repulsed. Unfazed by my lack of response, she stepped back, observing me. My, don't you look radiant, been soaking up the sun, she complimented. Thank you, I replied. Aren't you going to invite me in? She asked, anticipating. Please come in, Julia, Anna said behind me as I pondered how to deal with her. With a furrowed brow, I stepped aside. Thank you, Julia said. And you are? Julia turned to Anna. I'm Julia, Anna replied. I'm aware, Julia responded. What a peculiar exchange, I thought, closing the door. Their voices abruptly turned sharp. If words were blades, the room would be drenched in blood. Please have a seat, Julia, Anna offered. Thank you, Julia responded stiffly, still silent. So you're a friend of Mark's? Anna asked. I'm his girlfriend, Julia declared. Getting paid for this? Julia's tone shifted, accusatory. Are you insinuating I'm a courtesan? Anna countered. Well, let's not be too hard on ourselves. You're not unattractive. Mark's quite wealthy. I wouldn't suspect prostitution, but perhaps some form of escort service, Julia suggested. No, I'm sorry, I wouldn't want to intrude on your affairs, Anna said. What? That's absurd. So you're not with him for his money? Julia probed. No, absolutely not. It was a misunderstanding during his messy divorce. We belong together. I truly love him, Anna asserted. Me too, Julia retorted. Honey, let's face it. Mark's a decent guy, but he's on a different level in terms of appearance. I won't buy for a second that you're here for love, Julia challenged. All right, darling, let's talk about levels. I'm certainly not on yours, Anna said. Oh, come on, don't overstate yourself, Julia scoffed. Not true. You're decent looking, but I'm model material, Anna countered. Now let's talk about Mark. He's handsome, built like a tank, honest, open, and caring. He's a rare find. I'd love to have him. If he proposed, I'd marry him without hesitation, Julia confessed. Really? I asked, utterly shocked. You're just after his money, you cow, Anna accused. No, I'd happily sign any prenup, Julia insisted. Really? I inquired again. Absolutely, Julia affirmed. You fool, what do you think I've been waiting for all this time? Why do you think I've been so on edge since we left the boat? Anna questioned. Julia hesitated. What? Mark asked. Please don't, Anna pleaded. That woman Anna is no good for you. You need me, Julia stated.